I've wondered the real way to properly describe my story, due to it being within one of the worst atrocities in human history. It's hard to find a way to give the maximum effect for people, while still holding that high level of respect and responsibility, to ensure that the severity of what happened needs to be heard, to prevent it from happening again. This took place around 1943, maybe late autumn, potentially September. I don't know. In that place, all the days seemed to roll into one. Without as much as a simple calendar or clock, it was understandable for one to lose their internal clock and intuition. I was in my barracks, if you could even call them that. In Auschwitz, the beds were close together, like sardines in a tin. And now, looking back on it, we weren't even treated as human. You couldn't have an opinion. An opinion means a bullet into your head, or at least, in their twisted minds it did. Anyway, it was nighttime. People would try to get to sleep, but the slightest cough or cry could send the entire barrack into a frenzy, due to the fact that the disease was rife. I was actually almost in a deep slumber, ready to sleep for a time so short it made me second guess if I should try. Is it actually worth that struggle? I thought to myself. The Nazis banged on the door, loud enough to wake the hounds of hell in our eyes, but only a subtle touch to them, portrayed by the maniacal laughter which pursued their stuck-up dominance. We all arose swiftly, in the fear that we would be shot imminently if we didn't treat them in the same way we would treat God if he was visible on the planet. The SS slowed their pace, squeezing themselves through the aisles, throwing people into the wall who got in their way. I may have even heard a gunshot from inside, but with how frequently that happened, it just may have been outside. They examined the people around me, head to toe, as if they were a victim, analysing every inch of a criminal to embarrass them for their sins. It's absurd, I know, but they didn't care, and I must say nor did I, right up until that moment. This one officer, blue eyes, blonde slick back hair, and with a wicked grin plastered so smug on his face, came up to me. He stared me directly in the eyes, almost as if his eyes burned a hole through me, and he could see right through. He looked down and saw how thin I was. I didn't think much of it. For anyone to be a healthy weight was completely unheard of, as a lack of food and nutrients really shone through our work in the day, and the time we spent trying our hardest to be at ease with the world. He then proceeded to interrogate me, in German, which I couldn't understand at the time, and so I kept my mouth shut. Every time I didn't answer, he would hit me, with increasing pain and force. Finally, he stopped, and instead grabbed my arm, still with the same force. He dragged me to a huge barn-looking building, with a huge smokestack, piling the polluted cloud into the atmosphere. I couldn't understand how society could be in two different time periods at the same time. But then, I didn't question it. My mind was racing too fast, thinking if I was going to die immediately, via what they call Sunday's entertainment, execution by hanging in public. Upon entering, a strange smell filled my nose, one that was unknown to the average human, but to me was a day-to-day occurrence. The smell of death. I felt as though I was being strangled by it, but maybe that was just muscle memory, from the pain the guards mercilessly inflicted on me. I was dragged to a room with no decoration, no ornamentation, it was just white. Only a few air vents were around me, with nothing passing through them. I pondered quietly about what could be happening, but my mind soon realised the potential severity of the situation. A million new thoughts raced through my mind, and not one of them. However, all of a sudden, the same low-life guard yelled an order, and in a flash, the air vents kicked in. It was cold, and finally put my mind at rest. There has to be a catch, I thought to myself. Why am I suddenly being treated this nicely? But then something changed, and reality kicks in. The air was no longer calm and soothing, more frigid and brittle, more uncomfortable and more lethal. My body started to turn from a pale, malnourished white to a deep red, screaming for help. I couldn't fathom anything as my body went numb, and so did my mind. I saw a doctor across from me, casually writing down some notes about me. This enraged me, and soon my chilled arm's colour could be mistaken for anger and hatred. My last thought I had was I must survive, to outlive you, and live on a life standing by doing the opposite of the Nazi regime. And then I blacked out. I awoke the next day in a hospital bed, with someone checking my temperature. I'd been in that horrible environment for so long, I forgot what actual human care and affection felt like. The nurse explained the test I was used for, purposely being frozen to examine how the human body reacted to harsh cold, so the Nazis could attack Russia. I couldn't process it at the time, but eventually I learned how close I was to dying. I was sent back to Auschwitz a week later, and was kept for several months before being liberated by the Soviet army. I'm still around, and trying to live an intense legacy, and praying for something like this to never happen again. Because the pain and anger I felt in that chamber was unmatched, and I hope no one in the world should have to experience what I went through that day.